There's a special paranormal activity I learned recently, and the live footage is online as well. We're going to discuss all there is to discuss about the Philip experiment. A real ambitious thought of the experiment which actually blurred the lines between rational science and spirituality. The Philip experiment is an experience that remains an unsolved mystery to this day. Imagine if we could bring an imaginary spirit entity to life just through our thoughts, and then even talk to it and communicate. How would that feel? Now, we have done that Ouija board shit, not actually done, but people who may have done. But I don't know if that's the real case, if you actually can communicate with a ghost, but this thing was a legit something. Like, yes, you could try it. Now, the results are obviously it's debatable, but is this really possible, or again, it is just a trick played by the mind, which is the usual case 99% of times? So today we will try to break down the experiment, the secrets of the story, the backstory which lies within the truth and illusion, and see if we can come up with some reason. So, in 1972, in the city of Toronto, Canada, the Toronto Parapsychological Research Society conducted this experiment. It was organized by psychologist Dr. A.R. George Owen and his team, which included a psychic researcher as well, Dr. Joel Witten. This experiment was a unique thought experiment aimed at creating a fake ghost. To bring this fictional ghost to life, the team first created a fictional character named Philip Aylesford. This is where the experiment got its name, the Philip experiment. The group then created a backstory for Philip. According to the story, Philip was born in 1624 in England. At a very young age, he joined the military. In fact, when he turned 16, he was actually knighted. Philip was involved in the English Civil War and became a close friend of King Charles II because he worked as a spy for him. Philip was then married at a young age to a woman named Dorothy, but he was not happy in the marriage. A few years later, Philip fell in love with a Romanian woman, but she was accused of practicing witchcraft and was burned alive. Philip was unable to bear this grief, and at the age of 30 in 1654, he took his own life. So, a life full of adventures, a lot of honors as well, disturbing love story, tragedy, and death at a very young age. So, that should give you an insight. So, the group conducting the experiment consisted of 8 people from different walks of life, professional backgrounds. Some were engineers, some were students, and some were parapsychology researchers as well. Even Dr. Owen's wife was part of the experiment. The experiment began and they tried to communicate with Philip. So, they created something else and they believed in it 100% and they actually visualized it. So, that's how it all works. Believe in something, manifestation. So, they focused all the attention on thinking about it. At first, nothing significant happened. There was no communication and nothing strange was observed. Then, after a month of sessions, they started experiencing a presence. The table began to shake, a cold breeze started blowing, unusual noises were heard. They even heard knocking sounds as if someone was answering their questions. It was similar to the Morse code, where taps and flickering lights were used to decode messages. At one point, the table tilted on one leg, and on some occasions, the entire room shook, even when no one was touching anything. Audio recordings, video footage, and statements from people present in the room confirm these paranormal activities. This actually happened. However, Philip himself never appeared. Now, any sane man with a lot going on in his life must be wondering, why was this experiment even conducted? The main goal of this experiment was to understand whether ghosts are real or whether in certain atmosphere and environment our subconscious just creates illusions and plays tricks on us. In this example, Philip's story was completely made up, yet the participants began to feel a paranormal experience. Now, psychologists suggest that this experiment could be an example of the idea-motor phenomenon, a psychological case in which we feel that an object is moving on its own, but in reality our subconscious mind is controlling it. It basically creates a virtual reality for you. In a real 3D world, there's some virtual presence created by your subconscious. So this experiment aimed to prove that ghosts do not exist and the paranormal experiences are just a manifestation of the idea-motor effect. This is why the group felt paranormal activity, even though it was impossible because Philip never existed in the first place. Think about it. If Philip never existed, how could he become a ghost? How could the events related to him could actually take place? And how could he appear when he was called upon? Even the researchers themselves suggested that this could be the effect of collective subconscious thinking. When a group of people puts enough belief and energy into something, they can create an illusion of reality. Like I said just before, a virtual presence. The keyword used here is illusion, which means that nothing was actually real, but since all the participants were deeply connected, they experienced a similar illusion. It feels like yes, it's real, but eventually it doesn't.
On the other hand, several paranormal experts and believers argued that although Philip's story was fake, but through it, a real ghost might have started communicating. In movies, we often see that someone calls upon one entity and another demon appears. The best meme for this is Veronica. Or perhaps some wandering spirit used this story as a medium to make its presence known. The Phillips experiment had heavy scrutiny and it faced a lot of criticism because it lacked strict controls, the results were inconclusive, the findings were not considered scientifically reliable. When the experiment was repeated with the new fictional characters such as Lilith, similar results were observed. Because of this, the findings were not considered conclusive and concrete. Following the Philip experiment, several other experiments were conducted, including the Skippy experiment. This was performed in Australia. A fictional character named Skippy was created. Participants had similar responses, including scratching and knocking sounds. Eventually, no further progress was reported. The Humphrey experiment in United Kingdom. This experiment was more professional, well documented, and more prominent. A fictional ghost, Humphrey Gladstone, was introduced. Participants completed questionnaires to measure their beliefs, emotions, and skepticism. The experiment used scientific equipment, temperature gauges, cameras, infrared sensors, and chart recorders. Unlike the Philip experiment, this one aimed to examine anomalies scientifically. However, after years, the group stopped giving updates. So ultimately, we can infer they found nothing substantial or concrete, so they just stopped. The best reason I have is the world is not ready to handle the truth. Now, there are many movies and fictional adaptations which have been inspired by these experiments. You can watch it if you have time. The Quiet Ones 2014 and The Apparition 2012. In the end, the Humphrey experiment and the Philip experiment remain mysterious. As always, we can try to break it down, compare results, use a lot of theories to infer something reasonable. But it's always going to be word against word, and yet, even if you attempt to simplify it, it just gets more complex. So we can consult with the experts all you want, but it will again remain cloudy. So in my opinion, one needs to mass test this experiment in different settings with different people from all different walks of life, not just professionally, but psychologically, physiologically, and emotionally, with full solid documentation including latest state-of-the-art scientific equipments. Currently, they are experimenting with their attempt to communicate with ghosts which are of fictional nature through the group's joint focus on that entity. What I'm suggesting is that they should actually attempt to communicate with ghosts of people who have died and they belong in their acquaintance. Because if a person has died, there can be a lot of causes for the death, right? I mean, we have the basic ones, death due to natural causes, died gracefully. The second one which comes to the mind is a tragic accident. A third one is a slow agonizing death due to a disease, a murder, or a crime, result of a crime. And a fifth one, he died with an unfinished business at a young age. So a lot of these possibilities open up, and when you communicate with a ghost of a real person, then we would have something really interesting to see and watch. Then we would be able to clearly deduce the results and more precisely lay down the laws or whatever, any kind of rule book in attempt to communicate with the spiritual world. But if they were able to get something from fictional ghosts, I think with the same focus, the same determination, and the visualization of their mind, they would be able to get something substantial in their attempt to communicate with a real person's ghost.